would you like to be able to recover from trauma? Estefana Johnson will tell us how. She is a licensed clinical social worker and experienced trauma therapist with over 2 decades of experience in mental health. So, Estefana, please tell us, how can entrepreneurs go beyond trauma recovery?
Heal Podcast with Lily Patrascu shares longevity and anti-aging techniques to stay young forever, increase energy, overcome addiction, and live your longest, best life ever. Shared by world's most innovative, alternative, and traditional health thought leaders, healers, and doctors. Discover quantum healing strategies to heal your mind, body, and soul.
So for entrepreneurs, performance is key to be able to succeed. And a lot of times individuals are not really aware of how our mental health, our experiences in life can sometimes hold us back from really performing optimally.
Thank you. So what are the typical causes of trauma, and how can someone start overcoming it?
So, trauma itself is really identified as an event that you go through where you feel like you could die, or you experience a death or something like that. Usually is a pretty large event that happens where individuals, they could go through something that can be traumatic and not always be traumatized. Some people just have more of a capacity to face adversity. But there are so many things that can happen in our life that can cause trauma symptoms, from, attachment experiences to horrific experiences, whether it be assault or natural disaster, or, there's some ongoing stressors that can occur. Like if you grow up in poverty, or you grow up in a rough neighborhood, there's so many different ways where adversity can impact how our nervous system develops, how we connect with the world, or how we experience the world. And some of these experiences lead to a form of adapting that can later on become problematic when we're trying to kind of reclaim our lives and move forward.
Thank you. So what makes the difference between someone who is able to cope relatively well with trauma and some people that are not? The thing that I find very shocking, is some people, for example, even for a small thing, losing $15,000,
Yes.
do certain actions that would be endangering their life, just for that. And there are other people owing billions to other people,
yes
still managing to turn it around and then kind of get up, and even getting shot at, or I don't know, so many traumatic experiences that happen to them, even thousands or even millions of people talking about them badly on social media, and still not appearing to not care at all, and just moving forward with their lives as if nothing. So what can someone do to kind of build this kind of resilience in the face of terrible trauma?
Yeah. Well, and I want to just highlight, first of all, that not everyone who could just walk away from a tragedy is necessarily resilient. Sometimes they're disconnected, so there's so many things that contribute to an individual's ability to experience these things and either move on unfazed, or just move on and be able to grow from it, learn from it. And really what it comes down to is, from the moment that we are conceived, the experience we have even in the womb can impact how our nervous system is developed. So for example, if a mom that's pregnant is in a very stressful environment, there's a lot of stress hormones like cortisol that's going through her bloodstream, right through her body. And the baby, this is such a beautiful thing that as humans we have this capacity for, is it essentially the DNA or whatever programming in there that we have that creates a human adjust the nervous system, adjust the way it processes stress, because it's preparing for the environment. So even from in the womb, we can experience trauma, something that can impact how our brain develops, how we respond to adversity. Now, when you're born, and you have a caretaker that's very attuned to you, they help connect with you when you need the restroom, the diaper, or you're hungry, and you start learning those cues in yourself, and you start learning that this discomfort is about hunger, this discomfort is about the restroom, or something hurts. If your caretaker is very attuned to you and connects with you, then you start experiencing the world as safe. It's a safe place to be. You feel like you're connected. And when we're connected, we can experience adversity and get through it because we don't feel alone. Essentially, where it gets caught is when we feel alone, when we feel helpless. That's where we get stuck. So bring back to being a baby, if you have a parent that is not attuned, and it doesn't mean that they're like a bad parent or abusive, because sometimes you have single parents that are, working and not able to like really always be there with the child and connecting with the child. But then you also have abusive individuals that struggle with their own trauma that they never processed. So whichever side, and it really, everybody's so individual. You could have a baby that responds by shutting down and disconnecting from their needs. You can have one that is resilient enough, and gets through those things, and the connection is enough with a parent to still feel like there's safety in the world. It's so complex for every individual, but ultimately what our theory is with critical memory integration is that a lot of these experiences become memories, and why we differentiate them, what we call them critical, is because they become like the reference point for how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you interpret experience, right? So if you're in a state of helplessness or everything feels like you could die, then it really impacts the way you go through adversity, even when you get older. So a baby, a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, they don't have the ability to keep themselves alive, right? At 2, you can't be like, this is a toxic environment, I'm going to move out. You can't like pay for your own rent or anything like that. So you really rely on your caretakers to keep you alive. And so whenever there's experiences with your caretakers, it truly feels like a life threat. You can't handle it. So oftentimes those type of experiences go on to shape how we respond to the rest of the world. So now you're an adult and you're trying to like start your own business, right? And you get rejected. Instead of being like the person who has that secure attachment or that secure way of being, to you, it feels like you could die. It's unbearable because it's the reference point for that emotion response is going back to when it was a life or death situation.
Wow, it's fascinating. So I really can relate with that, with what you've just said. So I wonder for those people where the trauma is done, the damage is done, and for those people where the trauma is repeated, for 20 years,
Yes.
whatever it is. And let's say where they are still experiencing those triggers. And it could sometimes be not necessarily from the same person. It could be a replica of that person. And it's like
100%.
the same situation in another face. Whether
Yes.
it's women that are continuously still getting abused by their husbands or their coworkers or by whatever.
Yes.
How can someone kind of like start to recover from that? What are the steps?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge that part of that, it has to do with whatever tools we form, right, as a baby, as a child, that becomes like the way we see the world, and we're going to walk around looking for situations that make sense to how we are. So you see these cycles with like an individual experiencing abuse as a kid, and then they pick like an abusive spouse, right? Or they're attracted to an abusive person, not knowingly, not intentionally. This is like way beneath conscious awareness. It's not like you're like, oh, that guy also seems he's got anger issues. A lot of times you don't see it explicitly, but we do get caught in these cycles unknowingly because a lot of these experiences lie beneath our conscious awareness. Like attachment happens from birth to age 5. You can't really recall anything before age 3. Your long-term memory really starts forming after that. But your body, your nervous system recalls everything. It records those experiences. And so it's almost like you come across a person and they just feel familiar, right? So think about, like a moment ago, I just learned you speak Spanish. It's like, for me, it's like an instant connection. Why? Because there's a part of me early on, that's all I spoke up until age 5. So just meeting you and knowing that you know Spanish, there's something similar that connects us in that. And I can feel that, right? Well, whenever you have someone who's experienced detachment, has experienced like rejection or things like that, there's something similar about that too. And so it feels familiar, not in a comforting way, like a blanket comfort, but comforting in the way that it's like familiar. And so we inadvertently become kind of attracted to these situations without knowing that that is what's happening underneath until we get to a place where it's so loud and you're like, holy crap, how did I get here? And these are, especially when you were talking about some people go through this horrific thing and they could get past that. If there's good attachment, if there's a solid sense of self and enough for those capacities to go through it, we can experience some pretty difficult things and get past them. But when we have like these kind of like this programming, this wiring that came from either persistent adversity or disconnection ever since childhood, we never get to develop those skills.
Thank you. So, how can we stop finding the familiar? Or is it that we need to transform ourselves so that what is becoming familiar is good experiences? How
Yes.
we transform this kind of experience so that we create like positive reinforcement with good stuff as opposed to,
Yeah.
for example, sometimes you meet these people, right? These ladies, right? And they're good looking, they're gorgeous, they're
Yes.
successful, they have like everything, and then they have, I don't know, a number of children, and you look, wow, the children are so accomplished, but then you see them dating this guy that is like, what, and you don't understand
Yes.
what happened.
Yes.
Because of that familiarity aspect, that maybe that person is resembling the parents of, or some other abusive situation they've had in their past. So how can
Yes.
someone transform this abusive cyclical thing that happens and kind of remove it from their lives so that they're not anymore attracted to this negative stuff?
Well, just exactly what you said right now holds all the keys. You're getting it. So part of it starts with the first piece. It starts with awareness, right? Awareness and recognition. This is a cycle. The bad part, I guess, the unhelpful part is when we become angry with ourselves, or we become self-critical or self-blaming, because this is part of our journey as humans, is that self-discovery. And so when you become aware that there's a cycle, like I keep putting myself in these situations, or I keep finding these type of, I don't know, get betrayed over and over again, or find these type of people in my life, start getting curious. Get curious about what's happening with the feeling that comes up with this individual or leaving this individual. And this is where CMI comes in, because we wanted to look for beyond just something that works with the surface level. So with the way I was trained before, and I'm working with I would be working with a client that, let's say, keeps finding themselves in abusive relationships, we might start looking at like thinking errors, well, how are you thinking? And let's change the way you think, or let's improve your self-talk. You need to work on self-worth or whatever it is. What does that look like? You could say it all you want, but if you don't feel it from your core, it's going to be like a constant internal battle of trying to correct yourself, right? So instead of correcting, we look at connecting to these experiences that you had. And some of them might be lying beneath your conscious awareness, and you wouldn't even know that it started when I was 3 or when I was 2, but your body remembers. Those feelings remember. And so in CMI, we look at your experience as the signal, and we teach you how to go inwardly and connect to those things without getting tangled up in all the logic, because oftentimes it'll take you places that you wouldn't have put together logically, places that you're not aware of impacted you that much. It's not always a trauma. It could have been like an earlier experience where your brain made this connection, put meaning on it, and you didn't even know that's what happened until you explore it. So it starts with looking for answers inside of you, not outside of you. Which is ironic because I'm a therapist and people come to me for answers sometimes, right? But what I have discovered in my 20 years of practice is I don't know. I could never guess. I could probably take a logical guess, but most of the time that's probably not where it's at, because you're only going to share with me as a client what you remember, what you're aware of. And if these things lie beneath your conscious awareness, then we're going to work on the things that you give me, and both of us might not quite get to it. right? So instead, we wanted to take an approach where we could help teach you how to explore and find those answers within. And that's what critical memory integration is. You're able to go through, you're able to connect to that experience because it's recorded somewhere in like your neural networks, you know, in your brain. When you're able to activate that and you're able to kind of update, right? It could be that inner child work of holding that child that felt neglected. It could be giving yourself permission to speak. That's the beautiful thing about our brain is our imagination is powerful. And when you make these associations, you can actually change the way the brain interprets your experience. And that's where that lasting change comes. You come back and you're able to see things that you might not have seen before. So the individual that you're attracted to, you still see the stuff you might have been attracted to, but you also see this other piece that you missed before, like how they treat other women or how they relate to, you know, other individuals, something about their character. And that it kind of like broadens your perspective and gives you a better data to work with in making those decisions instead of just a reactive thing that's like driving, you know, from beneath your conscious awareness.
Thank you. Tell us some good habits for someone who wants to get into trauma recovery.
You know, I'm going to tell you, this is the hardest thing, but I would say stop looking outside of you for answers. You have to look inside. And I know this is like such a cliche, you know, meditate, be curious, but you truly, whatever your experiences are very unique. And even though there might be themes that other people, you know, could be connected to, you never know where this started until you start exploring it, like connecting to it. The other piece is learn to be comfortable with discomfort. Right? So discomfort is something that we often try to avoid when we look at, you know, anxiety, depression, stress. Of course, there's a level you don't want to like over stress yourself, but when you get curious, some of the feelings that come up in your body, all of those are signals. All of them hold like very valuable information. And if you're constantly working on trying to get rid of them, you shut out the wisdom that it brings. And so get curious with the discomfort. You have a situation where a colleague pisses you off or you get irritated with a certain situation. Instead of waiting for them to change how they approach, get curious about your response. Go home, sit down, allow that feeling to come up and sit with it. Explore it, taste it, savor it, see what it is telling you. Not just like, oh, it tells me I'm pissed and this person's a jerk, you know, not like that. But what is it telling you about you? And if you have, you know, adversity, you have, you know, experiences that are too terrifying to visit, where some people with trauma, they don't really have the capacity to go there, then find a therapist that you can do this with, that is there to kind of serve as an anchor. And that's what my role is, you know, for other individuals, is to hold that space for them and to serve as an anchor so that they can do this exploration internally. But when you start moving towards it, it actually goes by faster. Those feelings go by faster. And as that anger clears, the irritability or whatever it is, you start seeing the situation differently. And oftentimes you're able to see how your approach might be better suited a different way, right? So maybe I was assuming this or I was reacting to that. Maybe there's a possibility that that's not what they meant or that they're struggling too. And when we open up to those other possibilities, it gives us the power to respond differently, right? And which means that we can be more effective.
Thank you. I have this friend, okay, I have this friend who it has this like energy that it appears to me it's almost like she invites you to treat her badly, okay? And I think that maybe for a long time I had that energy, and I think to some extent maybe I still have remnants of that energy as well. Okay, so I'm wondering how does someone who, let's say, has been treated badly in the past and is like unconsciously emanating this energy of, you know, treat me badly because I will cope with it. I will be here like a doormat to serve and to, be at your command for like anything you might need or might not need. And I will be like anticipating your needs and think about you and, in so many different ways. And I'm there for you regardless of what you do to me or against me. So, like, how does someone stop emanating this kind of energy so that they are not inviting bad people into their life that would like likely take advantage of their kindness?
Yeah. I would be willing to bet that you do that for everyone else, but you don't do it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I hear this often, like, yeah, I can have compassion for someone, patience for someone else, but not for me. Start getting curious about that. Why not you? You're human too. You deserve the same level of respect, care, and compassion that you give other people. So you have to start getting curious about that. Oftentimes with people who come in, one of the things that I use, one of the tools that I use is I have them put their hand on their chest, right, and connect to themselves, because the hand on the chest actually serves as almost like physically like the experience of like a hug, the same way as like a hug from a loved one. And I notice people who don't have a good relationship with themselves, they almost like instantly withdraw. Just the idea of putting their hand on their chest is like, almost like giving a creepy uncle a hug. That's a problem. It's a problem if your relationship with you is not as good or better than your relationship with others. Why? Because then you're constantly putting yourself in situations where you play a role of the impossible caretaker. So someone else is struggling with their stuff and it's their stuff to work through, but here you come as the rescuer, right? And that's not your role. Your role is to take care of you. You can support others. That's a good help. But when you take on these roles, just be curious about where that came from and make the effort to start taking care of you the way you take care of others. That means starting to set boundaries, right? And this is very difficult because you're going to feel guilty. There's going to be the worries about they're going to think less of you. Especially when it goes to like people pleasing or the caretaking. I think that's the hardest thing to change. With my experiences, I had more of like the anger, protective thing. Well, society kind of pressures you to change that because it's not acceptable. But if your go-to is the people pleasing, society loves that, right? Everybody wants to be around you, but they don't know that you're hurting yourself. So it becomes up to you to start standing up for yourself. The responsibility falls on you to start looking out for you the way you look out for others. So it starts off with being curious about where you adapted this thing, and then making the steps to start treating yourself the way you would someone else. Start saying no to others instead of yourself. Right? It becomes a form of self-betrayal when you don't take care of you. So get curious about that. Work on that relationship.
Thank you. So that's what people who generally tend to people please in order to keep themselves safe. Is that what they need to do? What you just said, yeah?
Yes. And that's why self-talk, it's not that simple. I used to teach like more cognitive and be like, well, start by telling yourself, I love myself, and your body's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't feel it. So I tell people, start getting curious. So sometimes if someone really struggles with like very low self-esteem or self-hatred, I might start off with just like, what are the things that are not so bad? Tell me one thing you did right. Just a little bridge. Well, maybe you're not that terrible if you could do this or you could do that, right? And start moving in the direction. Start looking at the context of your experiences. We tend to judge things that we did like, I made terrible decisions in my 20s about relationships. And I can judge myself for that, but I forget that I was in my 20s. I had very little awareness. I had gone through a lot of trauma. All of these other things have occurred. Looking at the context is what's going to help you start feeling compassion for that experience that you had. So that's where the curiosity is necessary. That's where slowing down and allowing yourself to connect to those experiences is going to give you kind of a different perspective. And sometimes it's just a little step at a time. Before you know it, you start learning that you have really, you start looking at the things that you've done as like a strength instead of a weakness, a way to survive, how brilliant is that? That probably as a child, you learn how to please people who didn't know how to control themselves so that you can keep yourself safe. It's pretty powerful.
Thank you. So tell us, what are some good habits for someone to put in place so that they would experience more self-love, so that they would please themselves first, in a sense, so that they would stay away from putting others first and putting themselves first?
One of the things I used to do is have a mirror in my office and hold it in front of the person and say, I want you to tell me about her. I want you to tell me about him. Is this someone that is, are they kind? Are they grumpy? Would you be their friend? What do you know about them? Start looking at yourself from that perspective, right? And if there's anything negative that comes up, shame, guilt, those are the things I would start getting curious about. Why would this person carry that shame? Well, they went through X, Y, and Z when they were 5 years old. So as a 5-year-old, they went through X, Y, Z. How much power did they have over that? Like, start being curious about who carries that responsibility, right? Start being curious about the stories about you that you were telling yourself.
Thank you. Tell us where entrepreneurs can find you.
We are at arisealliance.org. Our Instagram is Arise Alliance Institute, and so is the Facebook at Arise Alliance Institute. And then we started a YouTube channel for little videos at Arise Alliance Institute 8735.
Thank you.
Follow me for more interviews with world's most innovative health change makers to live your healthiest life ever.